Hello, everyone. Today on Contested, we're going to be talking about the Paris Eternal falling to the Florida Mayhem, as well as the Valiant apparently cheesing the Los Angeles Gladiators with their new composition.
Following that, we'll be taking a look at the new hero pools along with Echo being banned, and then taking a look at all the viewer responses we got about the balancing of the game in its current state.
That and more coming up now. I'm Jane, this is Avast, and welcome to Contested. What's up, guys? Welcome to your Tuesday episode of Contested. As per usual, we are not coming to you from the Frontier Communications Studio. We are coming to you from our respective green screened kitchens, and I think it's your bedroom. I'm not quite sure, but
Yeah, this is the bedroom. You can see like the vague peeking out, and we're probably going to be here a while longer because if you didn't see, Dallas County, they increased our quarantine order. Dallas County only, not about the rest of Texas, for May till May 15th.
just let me out, please.
So you at least technically I don't live in Dallas County, but I'm living around there. So and for us in our work office and our space is there. So it's gonna be a bit longer that we're here.
And they've canceled school for the rest of the year, so the kids aren't coming back until September or whenever that is. So they get an extra long summer break, which they can't even leave their apartments. But you know what? I guess that's the same.
Except for all the
everybody.
people graduating. I mean, they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of feel bad for people graduating because so that's like the one payoff you get. Obviously, other than like finishing school and like having like a diploma and things, but like you get to walk across the stage for your family, and then it's like I see all the memes where people are like doing it online with the emojis and stuff, and they're doing the walkouts. Like that's going to be the graduation for this class of this year.
Well, the only thing that left to do once you're in lockdown, I guess, is to watch esports, and we had some great matches this last week. And before we get into talking about our full-length segments, we have another section sponsored by Favor, and it's the 60-second Favor recap. Now, I had this last time. We're going to give it another shot.
It went really well last time.
You know what? I think I have a feeling that I set the bar a little bit too high for myself last week.
It was a high peak.
Okay, and welcome to your weekly 60-second Favor recap. This week was certainly a lot more dynamic than Avast and I both thought it was going to be. Things started off with Atlanta pulling out the expected 3-0 win against the Washington Justice last Thursday, but immediately afterwards, the Battle of LA returned, and oh boy were there fireworks galore. Those Los Angeles Gladiators managed to pull out the win, but the Valiant didn't make it easy on them, forcing the series to a full 5 games and playing a couple of unique variants of a composition which included Ashe with either Torbjorn or Pharah over something much more expected like May. Most people, including the casters, thought that this was a rather silly choice, but as the match went on, KSP kept popping off and things started going in the Valiant's favor. So much so that the Gladiators were actually forced to abandon their own plans, whatever they had been, and mirror the Valiant's composition, actually managing to take a win on Ilios and taking the series as a whole. Despite earning that win, the Gladiators were very obviously annoyed and or mentally boomed by the match and took to Twitter to complain and call the composition that the Valiant played both dishonest and cringe, which is, in a word, rather ridiculous. Any viewer who was expecting things to calm down during the next day's matches would have been pleasantly surprised as long as they weren't a Paris Eternal fan. Despite every prediction to the contrary, the Florida Mayhem swept the Paris Eternal 3-0, which if you've been following power rankings is a gigantic question mark. We'll try to find the answer to those questions during today's episode. And the final exciting match of the Western World came from the Fuel versus the Shock rematch, which once again went to 5 games. Despite losing the series, the Fuel performed better than expected, once again committing the unforgivable sin of giving their fans hope. However, with the Battle of Texas coming up next week against the Houston Outlaws, another close loss just isn't going to cut it. Fans are going to need a dominant performance against a team in the weaker Atlantic Division to convince everyone things are different this time. And that is your Favor 60-second recap.
I liked it again. I was like, it's good, but you're right. It was like, okay, I wasn't quite hitting it, but then you hit the unforgivable sin of giving their fans hope, and I was like, well done. That's we've returned to form again. That's the quality I like to see because it's so true.
I gotta cut it down though. I feel like that was much longer than 60 seconds.
I just find it funny too because it's not only did we get a zinger in there too, but also the fact that we have a sponsored segment, and within the segment, we're able to, as part of it, say the word cringe, and because you're like describing media responses. I always love the juxtaposition.
It's really too bad because the way that cringe was actually spelled in the tweet included a K and a 1.
No.
I didn't really know how.
There's no way to convey that over text. I mean, you could say like he did in gamer speak, but
is that the way that you spell it when it's pronounced Carinja? No,
Yeah, maybe it's more of
maybe
like the different
it's different accents and
improvisation of it.
inflections.
So I think overall that was a fantastic, it was a very fantastic rendition once again of the segment. I liked it, but I think it also brings into our next segment of Eternal Mayhem. Eternal
what,
Mayhem has to be
what was
talked
this
about.
game?
Well, I mean, and also something of note, and we were talking about this before, is like, how long has XE been gone? And XE was been gone, I think, officially now for about a week ish, is what they announced at the beginning of last week before the matches that XE was going, or is it the week before that? I think it was the beginning of this week because they played
Yes.
2 matches right that week.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did, and they won. They lost both of them, but one of them was very close versus the Fusion. So not a
Mhm.
bad performance since Fusion's
Yeah,
now looking like
and
a
the
very good
Fusion
team.
is already looking to be what we're
Yeah,
putting that like the second best team in the league right now.
people are putting them, even some people are even wanting to put them at 1. So
Yes,
which is
like
great, but that's not once again not unprecedented, right? If you want to put them in the
yeah.
top 3, anywhere within the top 3, it's just depending on what your personal rating of them might be, but it's top 3 really right now. That's what it's
Mhm.
looking like fair for. So I think that is kind of crazy that they, even without Xe, they had such a great performance. But then they play Mayhem, who comes back, and Mayhem
Yeah.
claps them. It was really not even close.
I mean, Nimbani, there was some scrappy things as Eternal tried to get back into it, but yeah, like this match was, I've spent this entire afternoon trying to prepare for the show, watching the replay back, I was trying to find other people's opinions on it, trying to find one exact reason about what the hell went wrong. And to be honest, I don't have a singular answer or a singular thing that I can point to and be like, this is the reason that the Eternal lost. The only thing that I can really call back to is the fact that this isn't actually the first time that we've seen the Eternal just like hardcore choke. And that last time was the Houston Outlaws. And I went back to our commentary about the last time the Paris Eternal played the Houston Outlaws and they lost. And we said pretty much the same thing. We don't know what happened. Paris Eternal is a better squad than this, but we're going to have to see whether it comes up again in the future if they just flub it. Like, is the Paris Eternal just an inconsistent team? Like the Florida Mayhem, they certainly played well. A lot better than I think that anybody had really expected them to. Yaki and BQB, like the DPS find from the Florida Mayhem, looked crazy. Fate looked good. Chris looked good. But then there's the question of, it's Overwatch, really. Are they looking good because they're actually looking good, or are they looking good because their opponents are really just dropping the ball? And I don't think there was any one clear reason why the scoreline the way it was. But, the thing that makes me kind of go back to is, what the heck happened against Houston? Is it the same thing that happened against the Florida Mayhem? And regardless of if it is, what is it anyway?
I mean, I think there is definitely inconsistencies, and it's almost, now I don't remember for Houston at this point, but for the last matchup, obviously Xe's missing, but Soon just played against versus Fusion, and those Soon definitely had like a key beef moment during the Fusion game. He didn't play poorly at all,
No.
but he definitely didn't play as well in this match. And then also something interesting is that they weren't playing Bin Best. It was a lot more no smite during that particular game versus Mayhem. And so maybe you could argue that missing out both Xe, who's gone for health reasons, and swapping up another component with bringing in no smite could have been a big difference maker there for the Eternal. Maybe it changed up their comms. Maybe they're reliant on a certain strategy that didn't work out at all. But either way, you have to point towards Mayhem just looking like a far better team. Especially something of note is Gargoyle, because BQB and Yaki, we've seen good things from them in the past. Yaki in particular, even though the May wasn't great, they were able to play other heroes pretty well. But Gargoyle was sort of a breakout performance star at the end of last season, where he came onto the scene and was like, oh my good, Gargoyle is so good. And then this season comes out and we have other ratings, like most specifically Platch saying, oh, Gargoyle's not that good. He's a one trick. I'm like, no, Gargoyle is incredible. Don't speak about him like this. And then he kind of starts out the season pretty rough. And I'm sweating a bit because anytime that like Platch are about to get the upper hand on me, I'm like, oh no. I'm like, no, please. But then luckily Gargoyle popped off during their match here. He looked way better. His fluxes were far better. His usage, his rocks, everything was looking much better for Gargoyle there. And I think that's an important part for Mayhem, is that it's not just about the team as a whole looking better. It's about those really good performers that Mayhem were relying upon when they looked very good at the end of last season, which is specifically looking at their tank line, and Gargoyle looked a lot better during that match. And maybe we saw a decrease in tank line synergy or performance because of the swap in for no smite for the Eternal. So I think just having the more consistency for Mayhem is really the key for them because their tank line is such an important part for them and Gargoyle popping off, and also for my own vindication that Gargoyle is good.
Yeah, I mean, we've named 5 members of the Florida Mayhem. Let's name the 6th. Gargoyle. Gangnam Jin was very much the reason that they actually ended up winning the game on Nibani. Like that second
Yeah.
point of Nibani in overtime. You got the 4K with the Coalescence, which is kind of a meme, but his positioning, his ability to stay alive for so long, just managed to make them just coast across that finish line with a 3-0 instead of maybe going to 3-1. But on top of all of the individual performances, the thing that really impressed me was the actual kind of like mid-fight control and the teamwork within the Florida Mayhem, which I think is kind of the first time I've really seen it come at this level from the Florida Mayhem. Like they gave up fights where they were losing. They pushed. They played the macro game really well. Like read the situation quite accurately. Never really got caught out, overextended, stayed in a losing fight or anything like that. And they had a really good read on the meta too. There was a comment in chat. Where was it? Somebody said that Gray told Sideshow that they had a bad meta read. Sure, that's like that doesn't really give us a lot of information. But on the flip side, the Florida Mayhem did have 2 really good compositions. They had their Reaper-based composition, and then they also had their Hanzo Tracer composition. So they not only had a good read on the meta, but they had a good read on 2 different variations of the meta, and swap between them pretty much flawlessly. But that macro understanding, it wasn't just individual play. It was also a new level of team play that I haven't seen from the Mayhem before. I haven't been paying super close attention, but it's still a new high for them.
It did look good, and I think, but I do have to when we go back to the meta, to go back on that point, let's think about what Paris is playing. Paris did try to play. They were playing a lot more Doom and a lot. I think they played Pharah at points as well during that match. So a lot more Doom and Pharah. So they're playing like the Doom Reaper, or like they weren't playing as much May. And so it went back a lot towards the May at times. I think Yaki came out with one of those abysmal May performances in the beginning of the season, along with Who Are You, and looked much better this week, right? And so, and also it loops back into our other points about the, when Feifei left the Defiant recently, it's like, this sort of who gets the meta first going from week to week. But I do find at this point now that unless May is banned, it is almost, it seems kind of inexcusable now, because you always are guaranteed to at least have one composition that you can always pull out as long as May is not banned, which is a May comp, built around May, whether it be the May Reaper or a May Tracer, or May Doom. Like there's all May, if they're in the lineup, can always be played around and always build a comp around. So I think it's kind of inexcusable at times if you don't play May. And it's not that probably Eternal probably did have success with their compositions. I think much like Gladiators, when they were playing that Zarya dive with the Doom and Pocket with Brig, they probably had a lot of success. But I find that kind of inexcusable for teams that as long as May's in the lineup and not banned, you really always have one fallback pick that you can play, and it's the May comp. And not touching the May seems like it's an exceptionally bad read at this point, because we already have so much data from the hero pools and how May has affected them when she's not banned.
Yeah. I've got like 3 different ways I want to go off of this, but I was looking up because I couldn't remember who the new head coach of the Florida Mayhem is, and I just realized
Kuki.
that it's Kuki, former Soul Dynasty player. So that just caught me off guard. I had forgotten.
Yeah, and before that, Valiant player. He's been in a lot of different homes. Smarter than Custa. He was smarter than Custa on Lucio, supposedly. Oh no, not as smart as Custa, I should say, was what they said. Because remember, they did the whole thing of like Coach Moon said, Custa's too smart. We can't play him. We can't play Custa. He's too smart. But Kuki's dumb enough on Lucio, obviously, and that's why he's head coach. It just makes sense. It makes perfect sense, of course. But
okay, now that I've completely thrown us off, where were we?
Well, you said you want to go 3 different ways, and then you realized Kuki was head coach.
And then I forgot the other 2 entirely.
And then you forgot the other 2 ways that you wanted to go. I mean, I also add on to that, just as an aside, is that Kuki then posted on Twitter after the Mayhem win that he motivated the team that if they win the matches today, they don't have to play Overwatch or something. They were like, if they win the match, they can go play other games for like the week if they win the match.
I mean, all the other teams are already doing that, but that is actually pretty stellar. I
did that. I found that was a really funny tweet. Was that Kuki was like, yeah, guys, like if you win the match today,
no more Overwatch.
You get paid to play other games that you get paid to play games that you're not supposed to get you paid for.
That is quite the motivation. Okay. Let's move on to the weirdest match of the week. I think, at least in terms of the fallout afterwards, the Los Angeles Gladiators versus the Los Angeles Valiant. So Battle of LA returned, and the Gladiators won, which we expected 100%. I think most people expected it to be maybe like a 3-1 or something like that. But Valiant came out with their new composition, primarily based around Ashe. They saw sometimes with the Torbjorn Orisa, sometimes they played it with the Pharah and the Wrecking Ball, but really centered around this Ashe. KSB absolutely popping off on it. And then, despite the victory, the 3-2 victory after the win on Ilios, Gladiators having been, given up on their own strategies, they forced to mirror. They actually won the mirror on not Lighthouse, Well, right? They won the mirror on Well, and then took to Twitter and absolutely just melted down.
They were very upset. They were probably one of the angriest teams have been publicly, I think, in Overwatch League after winning. There have been very few times like it's not because also it probably is a very. And I had Goose come into my stream. Big Goose came into my stream afterwards, along with Gravy, and we had a quick discussion over it. And it is frustrating in Overwatch. It's definitely something that's very MOBA-esque too, because Overwatch has some of those MOBA mechanics of when you win, but it's not. And it's also something that's it also is tied into esports and competitiveness in general. It's not only is it frustrating if you win against something that is considered unconventional, but it's also probably a second tier frustrating because I'm betting you 10-1 that Gladiators going into that match thought they were the infinitely better team.
Oh,
they
yeah,
probably thought they were so much better. And then when they start making it close and they're playing a weird comp, that is going to tilt you off the face of the earth. 100%.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The Gladiators, they definitely exude confidence. They're playing confident. Big talk from Deepe as well on Twitter that even when they're doing well, they're like, we'll get better and then it won't even be close next time or anything like that. That's always been kind of the messaging there. So the fact that they were already kind of expected to win against the Valiant, I think that they really did want a dominant performance. And maybe that's the mindset that they had going into it is yeah, let's 3-0 people. Let's show them that we're a competitor. And when you set your own expectations that high and then you start losing, not only are you dealing with the crumbling expectations, but you have to problem solve a composition you've never played against that hasn't even seen playing in the Overwatch League before, as far as I'm aware. Yeah,
not much.
A dishonest composition, I suppose. If you
dishonest composition. I mean, it is.
I love
very
that. Dishonest.
I mean, it makes it instead of a 6v6, it becomes 8v6 because you have Torb and Ashe, right? So then you have the Torb turret and the Bob. That's 8v6.
Yeah.
The numbers are stacked in your favor at that point. It was I always thought it was pretty funny is that you got to outnumber them. You got to get the summoner class of Overwatch, and then it gets really good. But it is, I think, really when we think about pure Overwatch terms in the meta, to see a comp like that succeed is the Torb is fine, right? Because Torb, we've been seeing a lot of Torb play. We've been seeing how Torb succeeds against Doom, against Tracers. It's even moderately still good against the Reaper and the Mei stuff because of the shield presence and then the ult and all the damage. But the Ashe Torb is interesting because no one ever wants to play Ashe. Everyone throughout all the times said Ashe is bad. Yeah. Ashe is really, really bad. We don't want to play Ashe. And I also think this is a kind of a side effect of hero pools and why there is a net positive to them, even if it's not necessarily ideal, right? We prefer a ban system, but I think both of us would agree, but it's a net positive in that we also said a lot about Torb. Torb was really bad before. Everyone considered Torb really terrible. People considered Sim, aside from very interesting one-time strats that maybe the Hunters pulled out occasionally, really bad. Mm-hmm. But by adding hero pools, it does incentivize teams to sort of work around the bans that are currently available. And Ashe was the solution for Valiant, where McGravy said to me on stream was that they didn't have much time to prepare for the meta. They didn't have much time to practice because of the situation of practice and the swapping the pools. So they just picked okay, so we're going to play Torb because we know Torb is good. And then we're going to play Ashe because KSP is good at hit scan. And, it's pretty annoying and you can pocket him. And we see what worked out. And that's happened to work in scrims. Okay, let's go with it. And I think that's kind of one of those net positives of the hero pools, but also is something that is uniquely frustrating when you think about the fact that this comp was essentially just, MacGyvered out of necessity because they didn't have a lot of time to practice because of those same rotating hero pools.
Yeah, and there was actually a post. I'm trying desperately to find it right now. It was from Gunba, who talked about them playing it in scrims because they said that it beat. I'm on his Twitter page now. Here we go. We scrimmed 6 different Overwatch League teams this week, and all of them copied our entire comp. Some malding idiots on Twitter who spent an entire match dying to a Torb turret while birdering in space killed everyone are not going to deter us from playing whatever we feel is best.
Yeah, and I mean it was very, very good. And you have to ask too is that when we breaking down the comp and how we watch it perform, it was kind of crazy to see how valuable it was to have the Ash because you would look to get the dive on the Ash and get value from the Ash, but then the Torb was able to stop the Ash dive a little bit and you could pocket the Ash,
Yeah.
but it definitely required a player the caliber of KSP, I think, to really make it work. You have to have a really good hit scan to even justify running that sort of
Mhm.
comp.
And like with Ash, most people, I suppose, consider Ash to be bad. The reason that Ash isn't really played, primarily, the dynamite is eaten by Diva quite frequently, as well as double shields. It can make it harder for it to get around. But Ash sits very, very firmly in the exact middle between McCree and Widowmaker. For longer range stuff, for the headshot stuff, Widowmaker can headshot, one-shot headshot even without the Mercy Pocket, whereas if you do want a one-shot headshot with Ash, you need the Mercy Pocket, and that already is limiting your options quite significantly. The McCree, much shorter range, actually being able to use the flash, a little bit more escapable. But this week, I think, was kind of like a perfect storm for Ash to actually be seen in the meta because we saw McCree banned and Widowmaker banned. So if you did want to kind of play hit scan, those options were both off the table. So, in maps where maybe the Widowmaker would have outclassed the Ash, well, you don't have that option. In areas where the McCree would have outclassed the Ash, once again, you don't have that option. So I don't think this is something that we're going to see, multiple times in the future unless this exact situation returns itself. But it is kind of interesting that we do see the more long-standing commentary about why Ash is bad. It almost rings true in the fact that her most dominant performance comes when the two other substitutes, the things
Are
that get
gone.
played
Yeah,
over her,
she's
are
the
just
only
are just gone
alternative.
completely out of the meta.
She does have some interesting like upsides because I believe because also the tank that was banned last week, it was Rhine.
It was
So
Ryan, yes.
Diva was still available,
Diva
and
was
so was
still
Sigma.
available, yes.
So it felt really interesting now that one of our hardest and really Sigma in a sense as well, one of our hardest counters was still not able to get a lot of value shutting her down. And I think part of the reason for that is because of the Mercy Pocket, because of the Torb. Even if you rush the front line and then like the Ash were to go to high ground afterwards after the rush and get pocketed by the Mercy, if the Diva goes and pushes her, you have to face the pocket and you have to face the Torb turret, right? That's sort of going to
Mhm.
be peeling for that a lot of times. And because there's no dive being played at that time, because there wasn't, people aren't playing Tracer or Genji or anything, or even Winston and things like that. The Ash did have the ability to have a lot more value because there was far less things actually on top of her now, and you had a Torb turret that is strictly anti-dive often. So
Mhm.
I do find that it was a very unique opening for Ash in that particular sense, and that when you have a player like KSB who gets max value out of the dynamites, and when you get Bob up, who Bob is a generally it's not a great ult, but when your comp is based around running into the enemy team, and you have a Bob then not only knock you back, but it's in your backline shooting you, it does change the dynamic of how the comps interact a bit. So I do think it's a really interesting time for that, and maybe we'll see teams start to reevaluate what heroes are bad or what are good. But 99% they won't because, and I'm guilty of this too, is that you'll see a comp and you'll think it's really bad and it's really dumb. And you'll see heroes that are currently like not super powerful and be like, okay, no one should play this hero. And then someone will finally figure out like, wait, actually, this is really, really good. And we'll be like, wait, well, this is good. But here's why it's good. And then we'll just forget about this whole sequence and just keep on doing the same process over and over and over again for different
Yeah.
comps.
Yeah, there's some talk in the chat right now going on about the difference between Soldier and Ash. I think the like some of the key differences, just because there is this discussion going on, and we are going to be getting to our mailbag about people talking about balance at the end of our show. But just to add some more to it, when Soldier, even if he is being just as flanky as Ash, Ash always has the option of putting those dynamites over top of shields and putting a lot of pressure on. Whereas Soldier, he might have his 6-second helix right now, but that's just more shield pressure. And really, you don't want to be using your helix just for shield pressure. It's not going to get nearly as much value. The other thing is that Soldier doesn't have that one-shot potential nearly as high. If somebody just peeks out from a shield, or, if Ash uses the coach gun to either get onto high ground, like Soldier does not have vertical mobility. He's running around, he can take staircases to flank, but in terms of actual vertical mobility, Ash has it, Soldier doesn't. So you can get into positions where you can even threaten with that headshot a lot more effectively, as well as run away from people. So there's a lot of reasons why Ash is going to be much higher lethality than Soldier if you were to try and play him in the same way. You are seeing Soldier played a lot more in these more diveable compositions, especially comboed with Tracer, where there's that higher kind of consistent damage output rather than looking for picks and just trying to spam the hell out of them with resources like dynamite.
Yeah. And also Soldier doesn't have Bob. Bob is a much better ult than Visor, I'd say. I'd argue Bob is a much better
Yeah,
ult than
and
Visor.
the other thing is that like you mentioned the ultimate as well, but you know the in terms of like the class of characters in which we are comparing Ash against, you know, we're comparing Bob the ultimate against High Noon and Infrastructure.
Yeah.
Oh, I am very sorry.
I don't know, that's called the meta alarm, and the meta's been shifted. We've
Yeah.
noticed it live. And speaking of metas, on top of that, since we've been now on the topic of hero pools and characters in general, is that the hero pools got released for this next upcoming week of Overwatch League and also got extended to ranked as well, obviously, because we have this unified hero pool system.
Yeah, what is this?
And Echo is banned. So we just played a tournament. Myself and I was in that tournament getting hard carried, by the way. And then
You still did better than Fran though.
Oh yeah, of course, obviously. According to the gamers, I still did better than Fran, of course, even though that's not the case. But the point is that Echo is banned. Echo is banned. We just did a promotional tournament, and also the unified hero pool system was supposed to be about like based off the pick rates and like GM plus play.
Yeah.
But now the first week your new hero's out after you just did a promotional tournament, she's banned?
Yeah. And
what?
Not only that, like it's Tracer and Echo, because you know it's Sideshow I think was the one who brought up the point first. But when you do base these hero bans based off of what happens in ranked, you know, people in ranked, I think rank has been on a decline recently in terms of quality, the amount of people who care. You know, there was the discussion that they wanted to have this change specifically so that Overwatch League players could practice in ranked with the same heroes. Because having it differently, as soon as you're done scrims, you know, you try and practice in ranked, which most pros do, and it's an entirely different meta. Maybe the character that you need to practice for this weekend's game isn't even available. But you know, instead of having the ranked ladder based on the Overwatch League bans, they have the Overwatch League bans based on the ranked ladder. But there's different incentives and different motivations to play heroes to even work as a team in the first place. You know, you're going to have the characters that are much more either individually successful at carrying or just much more fun to play. You know, you've seen a much higher percentage gameplay of things like Genji in ranked than you ever do in the Overwatch League. So yeah, and then on top of that, with the actual tournament, Echo tournament coming out this week and then banning it, like
and obviously, you know, that's one of the problems with those unified systems, because also obviously the newest character on live is probably gonna have a high pick rate because Echo had just gone live, so Echo is probably gonna get played a lot. And she's also, you know, regardless of anything else about her, she's a very interesting character because of her high mobility and the damage that she can do. And like her mini pulse bombs just do so much along with her ult. And so she's a very different style of character than we've been seeing played in Overwatch in general for a while. So she's a great, I think, high skill cap hero. Now, I don't think she's going to be as effective. And and this was also said by other people, with when you don't have to force to mirror, because you're forced to mirror in the tournament. Like to promote the character, you had to play Echo. But Hitscan does kind of make her life not fun, and she's sort of treated like a Pharah, where if you don't have a mercy pocket at times and you're against like a double Hitscan and like a diva comp, like it's gonna be really hard to get value out of her.
Yeah.
But that is like definitely an indictment of the system in a way where we just have a promotional tournament. We can finally see the cooldown period on Echo is over, so she can go to Overwatch League and we can see her played. But because everyone's just gonna be playing her on live for that 1 week she's been out, she's going to get auto banned. And that was before we even got to see her get played.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, they keep changing the system, and honestly, they're being pretty faithful to the system. You know, maybe they don't want to come across as just like arbitrarily doing whatever. Maybe it's some sort of a competitive integrity thing. But, you know, even then, I don't think Echo was even going to be allowed in the Overwatch League, even if it wasn't banned. So it's really only affecting the ranked ladder right now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, you know, they're already changing so many things about not just the ban system, but the overall league. Like, how many times have we had schedule changes? Like last week we had Tuesday, Thursday games. This week we only have Saturday, Sunday games. Things have been canceled. Things have been rescheduled. Like, everything's changing.
But we got to give a pass to the schedule at least a little bit, because the schedule is
what
sort
I'm
of out
just
of
trying
control,
to say
you know?
is that everything is changing so frequently. I don't think anybody's going to have an objection to you being like, you know what? How about we just don't ban Echo?
Yeah.
You know, it's like just sanity check whatever the heck
But also,
you're doing.
then if we're playing devil's advocate, then also they go away from the, you know, we are complaining here a bit, because I personally would like to see Echo get banned. But if they were to remain consistent, which you said earlier, they are remaining consistent by banning Echo now, right? Like,
yeah,
it was, you know, they are performing by the system they put in place. And so I'm sure that even though we'd both be happy because we would like an exception to the rule this time, you know, in the future, if they were to do something like this, you know, or this current event, I'm sure people would complain, be like, well, this isn't consistent with the system that you guys put out.
Even then, like, we're only going to ask for this exception because they made a dumb choice in the first place. Like, if they
Yeah.
want consistency between ranked and league, and I think that John Spector talked about this, and I think there was a post from Kaplan as well. I don't remember which one of them between John Spector and Jeff Kaplan posted it, but they said that they looked into it and that like play rates were rather consistent or something to that regard between ranked and league. I'd have to find the exact post. I wish I'd saved it before today's episode, but they did say that they actually looked into that and that it was pretty similar. But even if that argument for going with ranked instead of league based on the bans because they're similar, if anything, that works in the exact same way. If they're similar, then ranked people have even less reason to complain because it's similar to what the league
Yeah.
guys are doing. So there's I can't think of a single reason why the dev team has decided to base the league bans off of the ranked play instead of the opposite. If anything, it should be the other way around, especially since
No, I mean, it makes sense the other way around for sure.
the league players are going to play what is good, not what is fun, because they have to win. It's their job, right? So that'll make the ranked guys maybe be able to actually play their fun stuff more often. Anyway, like, it makes no sense to me why it's exactly opposite of what it should be.
It is just a lot of things. For a maelstrom of chaos, honestly, in terms of like how everything is coalesced together, and this season, and just the scheduling changes and everything else. But I think more than anything else, and your base point is the same, is that it's scheduling we can give a pass for. Scheduling happens, it is, but when we talk about the format changes for the league in terms of how we see the rule sets, it was pretty simple from the get-go just to top down, just go top down and it's done. Dusted, systems change. But then it's like, well, no, we're not going to do top down. We're going to have two separate pools. I was like, okay, well, we're not going to do top down, but then it's going to be GM up and then down. And then also on top. And so it's just having these various gaps almost where we have to step over. We're like, we make it to the first checkpoint and they're like, well, this doesn't work, so we're going to iterate to the next. And I think that's it's not inherently wrong, because a lot of things, it's better to iterate than to not. But it's obviously, it would be preferred if we just went with the easiest solution first versus exploring all other options and then winding back up at the option that is eventually probably going to be the best from the get-go. And it's just more of an inconvenience than it is anything else. And also now I think we have to sort of take away from that and say, what did you think about Echo, Jane? How did you feel about Echo when you actually saw her and her kit and her play? What about Echo for you? Do you think, when we're talking about, we won't see her in Overwatch League, but what do you think we might see from her?
I mean, I'm really unconvinced on Echo. There's the fact that it's still really quite untested. We haven't seen her even. Again, we're talking about the Echo Showdown. What was the Flash Ops tournament? I believe was the name of it. The fact that it was forced to mirror. We're going to see a lot, and just like in the way that you and I were talking about Valorant last week, and the fact that Valorant, the way that it's played right now, is super high tempo. A lot of just like people being really aggressive. And then you saw, for example, in the ESPN tournament where all of the actual CS:GO players and the dev people who actually played it showed us a little glimpse of into the future. The people who either have a lot of experience in CS:GO or a lot of experience with Valorant, they're playing it entirely different. They're playing it way slower, and they found simply a better way to play. So I don't think that the Flash Ops tournament, for multiple reasons, is really going to be showing us the actual power of Echo. And again, I'm unconvinced, because you're going to get to the point where her ultimate is really, really strong. It's crazy strong and can lead to some pretty chaotic situations. Not only for Echo's survivability, being able to, if you're at 1 HP, go back to full HP on a different hero, and then after that, go back to full HP on your main hero. Like the tempo play off of that, not only do you have the potential to get basically any other ult in the game, but it's also, you basically get 2 free life bars. So like the power scale on her ultimate is crazy. And to be fair, I think her ultimate has the highest ult charge of any hero in the game right now. So it is suitably difficult to charge, but her kit is also really quite strong. A lot of damage, a lot of different ways to play the character, a lot of really good mobility, and really quite strong against tanks. So I don't think that she's going to do a ton. I don't think she's going to become a must pick. And I think, especially in ranked, one of the probably largest annoyances is that she makes tanks less fun to play and less powerful, because she really does work quite well against tanks, especially shield tanks. So I haven't really solidified on Echo, because I think we're still going to need play in a tournament where it isn't mirrored and where we can look for more specific counter compositions. But at the same time, I don't think when Brigitte was first released, anybody really realized how broken she was for probably a couple of months. So I could be completely
Yeah.
wrong, and Echo could be just busted beyond belief. But yeah, won't know that until testing. It's like theory crafting. It can only take you so far in a game like Overwatch, a game that is so complex as Overwatch. Like, the
It,
fact
it
that
takes the proper implementation, you know?
yes, yeah, you can it's you're looking at all of these Overwatch League teams, the brightest minds in all of Overwatch, and everybody comes up with a slightly different answer for that week's exam, right? It's you'll have some people who are just like absolutely dead set that this is going to be the case. Echo is this, but the real answer is nobody has any idea. So
It's tough
at
out
the very
there.
least, she's fun to play.
She is fun to play, right? And I think that's important. And I think also we're gonna backtrack here a little bit, Jane, because one of the great parts about having a live show is that we can respond to comments a little bit, you know? And
Yeah.
I was scrolling through, I'm listening to Jane. I'm like, yeah, these are all valid points about Echo. And I see somebody's like, this combo is very frustrating because neither of the hosts look at Jeff's essay. And that's actually where you're wrong. That's actually where you're wrong because my point was directly adjacent to Jeff's essay, actually. And I'll read it out too. I'll read out a little bit to it. Because in case you haven't seen it. So there was a post that Jeff Kaplan responded about hero pools in Overwatch play and rank play. And you talked about how they said the system is mostly working earlier, Jane.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much Jeff listing off I can't read everything because it's a huge actual essay.
Post. Yeah.
But pretty much the gist of it is they are talking about how they're changing the pools based off feedback. They've changed about their original design had two separate pools, one for Owl and then the player base at large. And they're doing all this. So it is just them, and all of this was everything we just said. Mr. I lost your name. One Shot Finch.
You calling him out.
One Shot Finch is that I just identified my reasons why I didn't agree with Jeff's essay. Just because Jeff writes the essay and says the reason for it doesn't mean I have to agree with it.
Yeah.
Just because he types it out in text, is like, hey, listen, here's what we did. It's like, so I drove my car over the bridge and it exploded into the river and killed all the native fit population. But here's my reasoning for why. And I'm like, oh, I get it. Oh, this makes so much sense now. Like, no.
At least you had a reason.
Like, you had a reason, but the point is like, I'm disagreeing with it, and I think you're disagreeing with it as well, is because they're iterating based off ideas that people are saying we don't like this idea. We think this idea is inconsistent across the game. And the funny part is that they're changing, right? Our original idea is like keep one system. Well, we have two hero pools. Now it's one system. And it's like, okay, but now it's like, well, we want to derive off a high base play because Overwatch League. It's like, well, we won't do Overwatch League, but we'll do it with the GM. And so now it's still GM, and now Echo is banned for the first week because everyone's going to play the new hero. So the point is that they're changing the ideas based off how we want them, but they're going through every iterative process first before settling on the original idea that everyone wanted.
And I will read out the problem. I will read out the one paragraph where Jeff doesn't give just one reason, but he does give two reasons why the dev team did it the way they did. And I quote from Jeff Kaplan again. And he says, so we made the decision to unify the pools, and we chose to have those pools derived by the player base because, one, that would be the most impactful decision for the largest segment of Overwatch players. He goes on, there are also a lot of logistics reasons. In the short amount of time we had to implement the change, a system that was evergreen rather than one would have to be re-implemented. Words are hard.
Okay,
it would have to be re-implemented anytime Overwatch League goes on hiatus. So the two reasons, basically, base the bans off of ranked, because ranked is the larger player base. I mean, okay, but the Overwatch League is still what is being massively affected. And the Overwatch, at least in my opinion, when you're looking at ranks, I think that despite the Overwatch League being a smaller proportion of the player base, I think it is more important to have the bans based off the Overwatch League because it is a competitive system. You have the competitive mode in the Overwatch League client, but at the end of the day, that's a casual game. It's a casual game. You see people getting paid salaries to play ranked. There's not $1 million prize pools based off of the ranked ladder. The ranked ladder isn't even taken seriously by the vast majority of the pros. If you are looking for a system that is based off of competitive integrity and the highest quality of Overwatch possible, you definitely need to have your system based off the Overwatch League. And the second system is that they would have to re-implement the system anytime the Overwatch League went on hiatus, which is a fair point. But considering how many times they've changed the hero ban system, that doesn't really seem like that large of an issue. Just have a different system for when the Overwatch League goes on break.
Just swap it on and off. You can
just swap it on
and off, right? Like, it's pretty easy. Like, so that's the point. That's the real thing, is that I felt like that was a mischaracterization of us both, Gene, because we'd obviously had identified.
How dare you, One Shot Finch? How dare you?
Yeah, we had obviously identified the issue. It's just that we just didn't agree with their reasoning to it. I
Yeah.
can assure you, despite the jokes that I am illiterate, I can actually read. It is possible, despite the fact that I joke about. I can put pen to paper with the best of them, and I think that
Oh,
will lead us in now to our
yeah.
mailbag because we've been
I
talking about
can't wait
discussion.
to read more bad takes.
We have a mailbag that we put off from last week,
Yeah. We
and it's quite long actually, and we already been talking about
we
hero
might have bit
balance.
off more than we could chew here because we asked you for your opinions on balancing the game if you were the developers, and we also asked people to include their rank when they gave us their opinions, so that we could, I don't know, we'll find out. But yeah, we had a lot of engagement last week, so yeah, we put it off from Thursday, and we've picked out 3 of the best ones. And yeah, do you want to start us off with Vast?
Sure. I'll go first. So, and obviously this was on the topic of like what balancing, and which is sort of directly derived what we're talking about, anyways. But it's more about a more general sense of like how frustrating it felt like the meta cycle of the game is at times. And so Aaron P. Walls said this, which is, I think the game needs at least one more tank with abilities that combos well with other tanks, but isn't miserable to play in solo situations. Too often to rank, the other tank immediately locks either Wrecking Ball or Hog. So true. All the solo flanking hogs. I'm sure people have been bombarded with this. I like to call them Elo assassins, because they directly assassinate your Elo. And then Wrecking Ball has escapability and Hog has sustain, but both seem to require a lot of effort / coordination / resources to maximize their potential in ranked. And that isn't always a fun way to play. And you're still not guaranteed to win. I think a well-designed tank could solve some of these problems. I am in low diamond / high plat tank main. Um, and I do think that's hits upon the points that we've talked about where
Yeah.
tanks and supports in particular need to have, and really everything, there needs to be that cycle of reward to play.
Yeah.
And they've experimented with the experimental card of having a solo tank, but they just never really had the proper tank or balance quite yet to have really a solo tank potential.
Yeah, their solo tank experimental card, I mean, that was painful to play. I really, really did not enjoy it. But I think that the crux of the issue here is the fact that in ranked, it's very, we were talking about it, where people want to play what they can have a meaningful solo impact on, like Echo, like Tracer, like Roadhog, like Wrecking Ball. Of all of the tanks where you can actually have some solo individual success, those are tanks where you can accomplish something on your own. If you are playing things like Orisa, are playing things, especially like Sigma, depending on the playstyle. If you're playing that card more like flanky, space denial, whatever. But in general, tanks overall have less individual impact and they are more reliant on the actual team to do things together. And Overwatch is a team game. It's not, again, like Valorant, where one person at any point in time can ace a team. They can go 1v5. And especially the way that high-level Overwatch is and has been for quite a long time now, it comes down to a point where in a lot of situations, it is the composition, the combination of the 6 heroes that you have that's going to determine whether you win or lose, not based off of your individual skill level, your individual play, your decision-making. You just don't have much agency as an individual player. So I think that's one of the big problems, is that the people who are going Wrecking Ball or Roadhog, maybe they started off as an Orisa main and then just like didn't trust their team or just got too frustrated and wanted to have a little bit more of agency over their wins and, being Elo assassins, also their losses.
Yeah,
Now,
they spiraled into madness
yeah.
a little bit. They're tired of getting just like playing Orisa. I'm like, okay, guys, I'm shielding and pulling for you
Shielding,
guys, and then you get walked
pulling,
over like a doormat. And
shooting,
I guess
pulling.
ball. I guess we're going ball now because it isn't
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah,
It isn't fun.
It is fun. Even when you feed, you're like, oh, well, and every time you die on ball, you're like, oh, if I had just done that, I could have gotten away. You always like just barely die on ball. But I love the last sentence of this one because it says, I think a well-designed tank could solve some of these problems. Just design it.
Just design it for it.
Just get a good design for
But
a tank.
I mean, but it isn't necessarily wrong. It is tough to find that like loop of something that's really. There's a reason why characters like Ball and Roadhog and Winston, because you have an immediate result upon your actions,
Yeah.
And sure, you need your teammate support still, but you have like that ability to make plays and do stuff on your own that really just isn't possible with characters like Orisa, mostly.
Yeah.
I mean, because pretty much every other tank you can do that. I think you have that ability. It's mostly just with things like Orisa, but also it's just so all the interconnected features there.
Yeah.
And it's tough to get that value right.
I definitely think that if they were to design, just based off of individual psychology, if they were to move the game in a certain direction, I would move it much more towards individual agency. People are going to feel better when they have control over the outcome, even if it is a loss, right? If people, there's games that are really unrewarding. Like maybe I'm playing in ranked and I play Orisa and I do that whole shielding, pulling, shooting thing just over and over and over again. And like we win, it's like yay! Like that was completely reliant on my DPS. Like I enabled them, but I enabled them to have fun, and I just did whatever. So I definitely think that it would be healthy for the game of Overwatch. Overwatch is very much a team-based game, team-based action, constant team fights. In something like League of Legends, you wait like 15, 20 minutes to get a singular team fight, which might be as exciting as the team fights that you get every single time you group out of spawn in Overwatch. Like the pace is just way higher. But that does mean that, there is the composition, the meta, the 6 versus 6, all of those dynamics are in play pretty much constantly. There is no equivalent to the laning phase in Overwatch where you really do have a chance for your individual mechanics to shine.
I think we should go ahead and move on to the next comment, and I can read it again as well because I might as well, because also it's pertinent to me. I feel, which is they
You're
start
also
out
just better at talking.
No, no one can get the roar that you can, the rabble type of thing. The Charlie, was it the Charlie Bram teacher voice in the background? Bush Doge. Bush Doge. I think it's Bush Doge. I'm gonna assume it's Bush Doge. If I were balancing, I would call the players out for being bots and say the game is balanced. But no, but in all seriousness, they say, I know that is going to sound like forehead dumb. I'm assuming forehead here means the emote, but they spelled it out fully. Is that there are so many unique characters in Overwatch with unique abilities. We need more of them, and we're going to need some overlap in roles that character fits on a team, especially in the tank and support categories, which is something we also talked about last week a bit about the rotating metas and how certain characters only do certain things and no other character does those. With more unique characters that do similar things, you can start introducing or balancing to that every character's broken philosophy, which is something that we've seen in games like Dota or even League, or so where everything is very strong. I think Echo is a great example of a character that can probably be broken in some hero pools because she has so much carry potential, but gets shut down pretty easily in others. Ball would probably dominate the take meta if Mei and Sombra didn't exist, but would be really strong in other metas where they don't exist. I think Blizzard is slowly getting there, and the game is pretty balanced, but we need more characters to flatten off some of these sharp metas. Specifically, make Mora have to care about her resources again. The management is one of the only engaging things about the character. And overall, I mean, those are all points that I agree with. I think those are all very good points, really.
One of the interesting things about Overwatch, and I've actually been thinking about this for probably the better part of a month now, but it's been sitting in the back of my mind, kind of trying to consider how different it is from other games like Dota, like League, like even Valorant, and all of them. At the very start of the game, you pick your heroes and you're locked in, right? You can't switch at all. Whereas Overwatch, you can switch pretty much at any time. So you really don't have the opportunity to have more of these unique broken characters where it can end up in more of this like rock paper scissors where A beats B and B beats C or something. You always have the opportunity to mirror, you always have the opportunity to counter. And if you are going to have the situation where it's like, counter in pro meta, it's happened so many times where as soon as one person is expected to change, the other person will send their DPS back to spawn as well, or whichever character they're swapping, and just wait and hold tab. Perfect information after first 15 seconds, the tab screen updates instantaneously. So you just wait, they pick, you pick. And since they're in spawn, there's no harm to it either. This kind of the ability to swap your character up in the game, and the fact that there is no pick system, there is no ban system, does, I think, really severely limit the diversity of heroes that we see in the pro meta. And I'm not sure if that can be fixed or if you would want to change it, but it is just that Overwatch is very different. You have this every character is broken philosophy coming in, but I don't think that philosophy would work nearly as well in League or Dota, for example, if you had character swapping like you do in Overwatch. So I haven't finished a hypothesis there. That's just kind of like a train of logic and questioning that I've been chasing and I haven't come to a conclusion yet. So
still in the midst of the Jane relative strength theorem. You've heard of the general relativity theorem, but now you got the Jane relative strength theorem that's coming to the fore for esports, and he's going to be hypothesizing on that one for many years.
Write a book.
It's going to get proven still like 50 years after you're dead. Still, it's still going to be like, yeah, this is actually right. Jane was right the entire time.
Yeah.
But you're not wrong. I mean, is the point, and also the commenter, which is something that we piggybacked off of earlier. Like I said, is that it is tough to balance it properly. And with hero chess, which I like to affectionately call it hero chess, and other casters and commentators have called it hero chess when teams go back to spawn and they just like swap for the first 30 seconds of the game, like back and forth. Like it's like, who's gonna blink first? Who's gonna walk out of spawn? Huh? Who's gonna do it?
This game's just gonna be a 5v5.
Which is kind of crazy. And it's also like we're still, balancing our desires with the desires of the developers. Because Team 4 is a very all for any game. They have like have a culture they like for their game. And Team 4 in particular is a very unique one because it's a very strong developer culture, I think, and a very tight knit group. As someone that's like talked to members of them, and I'm sure, and you've talked to members of them, and you've seen how they do it. It's like they have a very particular idea they want their game to be. When the game first came out, they were like, we will never have hero limits because I want to see 6 divas on Hanamura last stalling until the sun burns out in the sky. And then, but the problem is that is not fun. That is not, it works if you have 6 developers that are really, this is like their vision being realized, but then it hits the general public and you realize that like, that's just not going to work if you want a super engaging, fun game that's also diverse. And so it's just always a constant pushback of public idea versus developer idea. And where do the two meet in the middle? Yeah. And I think that's where we're sort of sitting at with your ideas in terms of the ability to either have more heroes that are less unique, or also the ability to just not swap heroes at all. But that would still require more heroes that are less unique because they have to have similar roles, which they don't now.
And I also think that it's it's one of those things where the player base, when they are left in silence for so long, because the communication from the dev team really hasn't been that good. They're talking about speeding up the rate of change and things like this, but we still don't really have a vision of the game from the developers. We don't have kind of like what kind of paradigm they're operating on, and things have historically been pretty slow. And when you have that, the player base is going to on their own develop what they think should be best, and they're whatever is suggested first is going to gain traction and just become kind of like, even if it's a bad idea, if it gains traction within the player base, you're never going to convince people that it sucks until you actually make the change people want and they realize that, well, it sucks. So I do think that this, regardless of which direction the developers go or want to go, and this is something that I have been saying for multiple months, is it's the developers' games. It's absolutely their game. At the end of the day, we don't have any kind of claim to being able to direct where the game is going, but you just have to let us know.
And it's the balancing act too, as well, right? Because the player base can be very convinced they want one thing, and the developers can be like, no, this is what's right. This is our vision. And then it comes to the fore, and then like 10 years down the line, let's say Overwatch has been dead and buried like a decade from now. There's going to be people in a forum somewhere that, yeah, Overwatch was so great because you could swap heroes. And even though we were fighting here for the longest time, like, oh, this was like, there really are components, like, it's just the vision versus the vision of others. And there's always going to have to be a compromise there. And it's just to what extent are the developers willing to compromise to what the player base thinks, when also the player base is like a fragmented group of thousands upon thousands of voices that aren't necessarily unified. But that's also why I think things like the Overwatch League allows a unification of voices, because you generally have a direction of what you want from something like that. But
yeah, especially when you get to the way that things like Reddit work in terms of being an echo chamber. You don't need much of a majority in order to have it look like there is a monolithic agreement on certain things. But do we have enough time for this last mailbag question from S Ultra?
I mean, well, we'll go ahead and make the note, by the way. So people that are sticking around or stick around after, is that there is no off the break tonight because Lando is having significant internet issues. It's one of the problems with working at home, is that if your internet is gone, that unless we were to suddenly give him a satellite uplink, there was just not going to be possible for him to be able to do off the break tonight. So there's no off the break after this, after contested tonight. But obviously,
sorry, Call of Duty fans.
Yeah, so sorry, COD fans, Overwatch League fans. I'm sure you don't really care about that quite as much. But we do have one more comment. I guess we'll go through it pretty fast, which was from S Ultra.
S Ultra
is what it looks like, which is they said they are a GM tank player. And I think the biggest issue of the game comes from developers not breaking the community's thinking model for multiple years.
Wow, that's literally just what we were talking about.
Yeah, so the player base has adopted a new philosophy towards the game where their instinct is to play. It is tied in a little. It is tied into what we're saying, but it is a little bit different. Which is their first instinct is to play static compositions over dynamic ones to decrease risk. I like where you're going with this. It makes sense too.
This guy's a thinker.
Since even if heroes get banned, they will substitute for other 200 HP plus heroes, like the rotation we see between like May and Reaper and Doomfist, stuff like that. Heroes that are high health DPS. They can add or subtract rules while the core ideas remain the same, i.e. Doom plus Reaper, Sig Orisa, double shield, compared to Ryan Orisa, compared is whenever the meta is next week. What I'm trying to say is that even though these compositions are played differently on paper, the play styles and thinking of the community remains the same throughout.
That is a
Blizzard
great
needs to
point.
quite literally beat this philosophy out of the players' heads with massive updates in quick succession, if to most, if not all, DPS health pools, and bring down where you're half the same time as you do now. So it's just like forcing all these interactions to be a lot faster. You also need to make. He also says that Ryan needs to once again become the main force rather than a facilitator for the DPS, like Reaper, May, and McCree. High ranked tank players that have been playing for a long time will know what I mean when I say that Ryan Twin same as Ryan during the beginning of the game. Uh, and then it says the playstyle of Ryan has slowly drifted to something that is akin to Orisa, where you're just waiting for key DPS interactions to occur before you can play the game the way you want to play it. I'm liking what this guy's putting out.
I like this. This is a pretty big brain comment. The one thing that I'm gonna kind of push back against is I think that the dynamic isn't something that you can beat out of players, and I think that it comes down to an incentive system in the way that ranked is once again played, and the fact that he's talking about the players playing these static compositions because they are a decrease in risk. And I think it is, in fact, that there's a disproportionate higher amount of risk in a ranked system where you aren't playing with the same individuals, where you don't really know how your teammates are going to react. So everybody is playing kind of to the point where they can predict what their teammates are going to do. You kind of have to assume that everyone is the lowest common denominator. Trying to expect big things out of your teammates in ranked. Like if you are trying to make a play where your teammate needs to do XYZ, or you need your support of your teammate or something like that, there's a pretty high chance that it's not going to happen. And over time, if that sort of play, if it's like, make this play with the support of your teammate. If you don't get the support, you die. If you do, then you succeed. There's still that risk of dying first, getting picked. That's going to cause you to lose quite frequently. The much safer strategy is to play safe, play in a way where you can just passively pressure, take no risks, and then look to capitalize on a mistake of the opponent. That's going to be just how things are in ranked, because you do have to predict your teammates to be the lowest common denominator of their role, unless there is active communication, quite a lot of just talk, communication, as well as throughout the game. You'll start to get a feel for who on your team is good, who is support, how much can you trust, and you can adapt throughout the game. For example, if your Ana isn't playing well, you can play with less heals. When you're actually on a team like the San Francisco Shock, for example, the San Francisco Shock does not have this problem. They know their limit, they can be proactive, and they can just absolutely go for the jugular whenever they want. There's absolutely zero hope of you ever getting just a random ranked team to play in that regard, because of the fact that it's just 6 random people every time. And even if you do get the 6 best players on a team, they all don't have enough information about how good their teammates are, and they have to play safer. They have to play with a decreased amount of risk, because that is the optimal strategy in ranked.
I also find, and also I'm going to add addendum to there, is that, Shock sometimes know what they're doing, unless they're making weird substitutions. Then, Shock, we don't know what they're doing. I don't think they do either. But
or Lucio's banned.
Yeah, or Lucio's banned. And then, they don't have Moth to speak to them with his golden curls and such. But I also think that this is it's really interesting, because I almost feel that I agree with all of his statements, but they're applied incorrectly, because I don't feel like a lot of these things are something that's applied to ranked. Because in ranked, Echoes, we have stuff like Genji and Tracer being highly picked, right? Which is kind of directly contrasting what this statement is putting out, because a lot of players will go against the philosophy of what is considered good by high level, like actual pro players, to play what is fun. I feel like this philosophy is actually more applicable to pro play, where in pro play, there has been this shift towards it is always better to have an easier to execute comp that has more guardrails on it and more win conditions than there is to one where you have to have perfect execution like Dive, especially against comps with all those guardrails. Like, when you're playing Dive into the May Reaper and things like that, like, and the Orisa Sig, it is a lot harder to get it done than it is if you just mirror it, because of how many extra options you have and how much extra health pools you have. And so I feel like this is almost improperly applied to ranked versus professional play, and how the game has evolved in that way.
I get the feeling that our buddy S Ultra here, he's commenting based off of like the quality games in GM. I don't think he's including his discussion on the meta where like people are throwing and there's somebody just randomly playing Genji or something like that. And it is kind of interesting. I think that was one of the things that I complained about a lot of teams doing. Like, the Dallas Fuel, for example, that's one of this very static, low risk thing is something that they tried early on in the season, didn't work for them. They're moving to a much more aggressive style and paradigm of play with Doha and Decay. Whereas you do see teams that are being really successful, both Seoul Dynasty and Shanghai Dragons, I think, are using this kind of thing where they do play those compositions with a lot of guardrails, things that fit into a lot of situations and don't really have that higher high, but also don't have that lower low. They don't have as glaring of a weakness. You know, there is the situation where if you're talking about probabilities, it's like, you know, what is the chance of you reaching this power level versus making a mistake and dropping your power level? There's going to be teams that are just going to be more comfortable sitting at a power level that isn't quite as high as a composition, but has fewer risks, which will cause them to lose. So it's you know, it is,
but still a good
risk.
comment either way. Still
yeah, it's a great comment.
Like
gets the brain flowing.
The points are correct. The points are honestly very correct, and I agree with a lot of them. I just think it's like it's slightly improperly applied. And also, that was our last mailbag.
I'm glad we saved that one to last. That was a good one.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
So that was that we've gone through all of them. I'm glad we put it off this week when we had a little bit more time. Because also now we don't have to worry, I think, because we're gonna have a regular Thursday showing of Contested. Because there are no games on Thursday. So we'll have a non-short crunched one this week. So you know, we have to think about what should we ask our viewers today, Jane. I'm kind of leaning towards Echo maybe, or I don't know. What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, yeah, I guess
Echo?
we just saw the Flash Ops tournament, so yeah, let's take a look at what people think about Echo. Have your opinions changed after the Flash Ops tournaments? Do you think she's going to be overpowered, underpowered? I really liked people's comments on Balance. Honestly, there was a lot of good feedback, a lot of good ideas and comments. Some of them were funnier than others, but yeah, I mean, if we can get another comment like S Ultra there, let us know what you think about Echo. Really, we'll leave it pretty open because we didn't prepare a specific mailbag question for today, but we will read out your comments on Thursday.
I specifically I think in addition to what your general thoughts on Echo may be and how, you know, what you might change from initially, I'd also specifically like to ask specifically what do you think about her ult? I want to know what you think about Echo's ult in particular, viewers, because I think the ult is quite possibly one of the craziest good things that have been done, but also one of those wildly broken things that is also
You're
possible.
not biasing the responses at all, are you?
But also I could be very wrong. That's why I'm asking your opinions, because I should have opinions, but I should also listen to others' opinions.
Okay, chat. Just because Avast has biased you so much, I challenge you to try
counter bias.
I would like you to try and rationalize why Echo's ultimate is actually the worst in the game.
Yeah.
If you could accomplish that, I don't know. I'll give you a high five if I see you at the grand final.
I mean, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it. But overall, very productive mailbag.
Yeah. Look forward to seeing what you guys got for us on Thursday. Once again, for those of you guys who are just joining in or waiting for the COD show off the break, unfortunately, Lando, his internet has gone out. The Elo assassins got to him. So not only is our boy locked in quarantine, but he's also locked in quarantine without internet. So thoughts and prayers to him. If you guys are watching on Twitch, YouTube, or Twitter, remember that this is a live show and we see your comments throughout the show and usually respond to them and engage with them. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. And if you are watching, or rather listening to this show on your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we'll see you at the next one. I'm Jane, this is Avast, and this has been Contested. Have a great day.